Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ignorant Intellectual on Media. Today, I thought we'd do another mixed haul. I'm going to be doing some more of my library soon. Um, we're still on. If you look back on my videos, we're still on my directors section, and I'm getting to the end of my directors section. Then we'll move on to other parts of my library. But once we do the directors, I'm probably maybe a little bit more than halfway through all the movies that I have. And they seem to be pretty popular, so I think I should get back to them at some point. It's just that the end section is in a corner of my basement that's really hard to reach. So doing a sustained video, pulling them out and showing them and then putting them back in, I'm kind of in an awkward position. So, but I'll make it through, I guess. Anyway, so let's do a mixed haul. All right, we got some books, some movies, and some CDs. All right. So first up, let's do some books. We'll do The Call of the Wild, which is one of my favorite children's books about what was the name of the dog that ended up he has this nice posh life in California, right? But then he gets kidnapped and brought to the north during the gold rush and ends up being attached to a sled. What was his name? Buck. That's it. So he was in Santa Clara Valley, but then he gets kidnapped and goes up to the Yukon, right? So anyway, so it's quite a good read. Especially if you're like, in the 10-year-old range around there, 10, 12 years old around there, you'll quite enjoy this and, some Jack London and some other books. Some other of his books are really good as well. I mean, there's so many good books for that age group, right? Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Roald Dahl, James and the Giant Peach, E.B. White's Charlotte's Web or Stuart Little. There's a whole bunch of them, right? What I started reading when I was young, well, obviously everybody kind of reads Dr. Seuss, but after that, once you get a bit of a hold on actual words, right, where you can read longer words and you understand the meanings of words, right? 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, around that age, I started to read like the Encyclopedia Browns. Have you ever read Encyclopedia Browns? Maybe your kids are like that. They're like kids' Sherlock Holmes mystery novels, but with simple plots where it's not like there's a murder or anything, but no, somebody like steals somebody's $5 bill or a coin or a sports card or something like that, and then Encyclopedia Brown looks at the evidence and then figures out by the end of the book who committed the crime, right? It was quite interesting. I really enjoyed those. But digressing. So speaking of E.B. White, here's Charlotte's Web. I found that book as well, basically about a pig who's on a farm to be fattened up to be used as Christmas dinner, I think, if I remember correctly. And there's a spider named Charlotte who lives in the barn by the pen, and by the pen of Wilbur, who's the name of the pig. And so she starts, weaving her web, putting in words to help save the pig from being slaughtered, and it actually saves his life, right? Anyways, it teaches kids about loss and about death, because Charlotte dies in the book, but she's replaced by, the spider will die after it gives birth to, all of its kids or whatever. So you have like later on, Wilbur ends up becoming friends with like three of Charlotte's kids, basically, who spin webs in the barn as well, right? So, but it's about loss, and it's that kind of thing. It's a really good book. All right, so two of the great children's books, the 8, 9, 10-year-old books, and this is part of the Puffin Classics, which is a great series of children's books. Basically, the Penguin's Classics for adults with all the different classic novels, books, history books, philosophy, and all that. But then what they do is they went from to the Penguin. They used puffin instead of penguin, a puffin bird instead of a penguin, to denote their children's series of classic books, right? So The Wind in the Willows. There's a whole bunch of different ones that are part of that series of books that are really good, right? So next up is Edward de Bono. Found two of his books, The Six Thinking Hats and Practical Thinking. Basically, he's like a psychologist philosopher, and he basically, just like, let's say you want to learn something, whether it's history, whether it's whatever, name a subject you want to learn about, you have to like learn. You have to read, you have to practice, you have to, think and everything. Well, there's a practice of becoming a better thinker as well. And Edward de Bono has like an in-depth knowledge of that. And here's two of his main books. This one is more of business oriented, where you have six hats. He gives like six hats, different colored hats for different ways of thinking about a subject or about a problem or a thing that you're going to do in business or whatever. So I can't remember the exact. So you put on a black hat for a critical viewpoint, a yellow hat for sunny optimism, a green hat for wealth and creative ideas, white for neutrality, and red for emotion. And then once you put all those together, you get a sky blue hat, which gives you a detached overview of all of it. Anyways, he goes through it all, and they're extremely popular ways of training your mind to think clearly and think better, right? And that's basically what most of his books are about, right? And this is practical thinking, which basically, the black cylinder experiment. Have you ever heard of that experiment? Anyways, he goes in depth into the black cylinder experiment. I don't want to go into that thing and explain it. It might take 15, 20 minutes to do it, but basically it's a way of thinking, teaching you how to think. And there was like this experiment done with the black cylinder where they got 1,000 people together. And anyways, he goes through the whole thing. He has like diagrams and other things inside. And basically after you read this book, you'll end up starting to think a bit differently and think more critically and think, it's like a college course for your brain to think better. You know what I mean? Anyway, so De Bono's really popular on that. So I picked those books up. They're very easy to resell. So that's Edward de Bono, and one more book, which is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. This is the book that put Virginia Woolf on the map as one of the greatest 20th century writers. You can compare it to anything. This is basically, if you like intellectual, if you like mind type of books, this is the book for you. There's no action in it. There's hardly any movement. It's basically just thinking about. There's this family and the different people that are in the family and the thinking process. I don't know. I think there's like six. Is it six of them? Might be three. I'm not sure. It's been like a really long time since I read this book, but basically, if you're more of a cerebral reader, Virginia Woolf is definitely for you. And so if you haven't read her, you gravitate towards her and pick up some of her stuff. It's really good. All right, let's do CDs now. Here we have the London Howlin Wolf sessions. This was put out like in the early '70s. Give you a good look at it. When Howlin Wolf was like on the other side of the hill, if you put it that way, and they got together with him, like a bunch of musicians from like, the '70s. What do they call it? Like second wave rock and roll artists. But they had a session in London. It was spawned, I think, by Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters did a London session as well, right? And then afterwards they said, hey, why don't we get Howlin' Wolf out here and we'll do a Howlin' Wolf session. And basically got, like Steve Winwood, Eric Clapton, what are the guys from the Rolling Stones that was Ian, the keyboardist, Ian, I can't remember his name, but Bill Wyman, who was the bass player for the Rolling Stones, and Charlie Watts was there, the drummer for the Rolling Stones. Ringo Starr was there to do some work as well. So it's like a who's who. London Wolf sessions, doing like a bunch of London Wolf songs like Rockin' Daddy, I Ain't Superstitious, Sitting on Top of the World. All right. Anyways, they do 13 of his with of course London Wolf being there. Howlin' Wolf being there as well, right? So next up is Stan Getz' big band Bossa Nova. All right. Stan Getz is one of the greatest. Did he play alto? sax. No, he played sax, but which one was it? Tenor. I think it was a tenor sax he played. If I remember correctly, sax. Like when I listen to jazz, there's two things that I really like listening to. I really like listening to female vocal-led jazz, so like Billie Holiday or Sarah Vaughan, or more modern ones like Molly Johnson. I don't know if you ever heard of her. She's a Canadian. Listen to her stuff; it's really good. Diana Krall is another one, another Canadian, but most have heard of her. Not so much of Molly Johnson, so you should pick up some Molly Johnson if you haven't heard of her. And all the great female jazz singers over the ages. I'm not huge on male jazz-led stuff. I'm not a big fan of that, except for Chet Baker. Chet Baker is really good. He's got that really, really somber, sad, drug-induced voice. You know what I mean? That's really melancholy, but most jazz singers that are male, I have no interest in for some reason. Or jazz, non-vocal jazz that is led by a saxophone. I like the trumpet as well, like Miles Davis's stuff. But it's the saxophone that really attracts me, like John Coltrane and him, Stan Getz, one of the great. Anyway, so here he kind of gets together with Gary McFarlane, tells Gary McFarlane, hey, can you come up with some arrangements in the bossa nova field of jazz? Because he wants to play some bossa nova. And so Gary McFarlane puts together 4 arrangements, and they do a copy of 4 arrangements that are already out there. And they put them all together in this jazz album. So if you like bossa nova, this is some of the best bossa nova that you're going to hear in this CD. All right. Then we have This Year's Model by Elvis Costello and the Attractions. I think he got together with the Attractions by this time. It's 1978. This is his second studio album. All right. And the thing about Elvis Costello that's really good is his lyrics. And he was like one of the main protagonists to start the new wave that hit it big in the 1980s, right? His stuff, right? So you get like No Action, This Year's Girl, The Beat, Pump It Up, Little Triggers, You Belong to Me, Hand in Hand, Lip Service, Living in Paradise, Lipstick Vogue, and Radio on this album. It's one of his best. I don't know. Some people think his first album is good, but I think this one is probably his best in my opinion, because he gets together. His first album he did solo, but this one he gets a competent, really good band together to back him up, and it shows in the music, right? So, all right, and the Arctic Monkeys' first album. It's such a long title that I'll just read it. Whatever people say I am, that's not what I'm not. When this album came out, and I heard I Bet You Look Good on the Dance Floor, I was sold, and then I listened to the whole album, and then it had already been out for a while, because within a few weeks of me listening to this album, their second album came out, right? And so then I picked up that album once it first came out, and I listened to both of them. This one is better than the second one, but both the first one and the second one are extremely, extremely fun, upbeat, guitar-driven rock and roll that's just awesome. All right, it's I don't know what to tell you about it. You listen to it, you're going to grab a hold of it, and you're not going to put it down. Now, the group of people that I hang out with on the internet on occasion, I used to do a lot more in the early 2000s. They kind of panned some of these guys' work, but these guys are extremely fun. I don't know. It's listen to it and you tell me. Leave it in the comments. This is one of the greatest post 2000 bands to come out of Britain ever. All right, so over the last 25 years, this is one of the bands that I would hover towards and listen to if I was going to end up on an island and I only had a few albums. I would pick this one if I wanted to get up and start bouncing around and enjoy my life, right? So extremely good stuff. All right. Although smoking on the cover, I'm not sure about that. All right, and last CD is a live concert from Miles Davis. Now this was put out in when did he put this out? It was in the 60s, the early 60s, this live concert at the Plug Nickel in Chicago. It was a big like Halford. It wasn't a very large place. If I remember, I've never been there, but from my understanding, it wasn't a huge place. But it was big in jazz, and a lot of people ended up going there in Chicago. And if you were a jazz player, you would be at the Plug Nickel, right? So, but basically, this is after Coltrane left and went on a solo career. And so his first band, that was it a quintet or a quartet? I can't remember. Anyway, Coltrane was the saxophonist for the band, right? And he left in I think it was '61. He left, and then the band kind of split up after that, and then Davis kind of went not so much as a hiatus, but he was kind of spinning. His career was kind of spinning, right? So, but then later on, a few years later, he ended up getting together with is it Wayne Shorter? I think it was Wayne Shorter joined the band, and that's when they started taking off and started playing some music that was worthy of the first band. Was it Wayne Shorter? Has to be Wayne Shorter, wasn't it? Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter, yeah. So Herbie Hancock played the piano, and Wayne Shorter played the tenor sax, right? So Wayne Shorter was playing with another group. I can't remember the guy. Man, when you get old, you just lose. Anyway, but he had left that band, and Miles Davis had asked him earlier to join his band, but he had just joined up with this other group, and he didn't want to leave that group. It would have been totally rude, you get invited to join a group and then you join it, and then less than a year later you leave and you go play with Miles Davis. It wouldn't give you a very good reputation or whatever, right? So, but he ended up leaving a few years later, and that's when Miles Davis ended up grabbing him and putting him in this band, and they played live at the Plug Nickel in Chicago. All right, so you can't avoid Miles Davis, nor would you want to, but if you want to listen to jazz, especially 50s and 60s jazz, he's just, he's one of those artists that cross barriers, right? He's like, who would be another guy? There was somebody, Bob Marley. So Bob Marley is a well, everybody's heard of Bob Marley, but he plays reggae, right? But people would know nothing about reggae and not even get into reggae and still know Bob Marley's music, because he just transcends any genre of music, right? He ends up moving right into the zeitgeist and the popularity, and there's very few artists that are in a certain genre of music that will break through that genre and people will listen to them that have no interest in that genre of music. Bob Marley's one. Miles Davis is another one that's like that for the jazz. People may not listen to jazz at all, but they'll listen to, like Kind of Blue or whatever. You understand what I mean? So there are very few artists that are like that. Hank Williams, maybe, for country, like really hardcore early country. Hank Williams might be one of those guys that would move in, that people may not listen to country music, but they would listen to Hank Williams, maybe. Anyways, it's Marvin Gaye for soul music, that kind of thing. All right, so those are the CDs. Now let's do the movies. I'm going to do the movies that I've shown you before, but I've actually had the chance to watch. All right, so where is it? This one here, JSA, or Joint Security Area. Yeah, Joint. It's by Park Chan-Wook Park, or Park Chan-Wook. All right, so for some reason, the Koreans put their last name first and their first name last when you read out their name. So his first name is Chan-Wook and his last name is Park, but when you say his name, you say Park Chan-Wook for some reason. All right, so it'd be like me using Scott as my, I would say Scott last, Scott being my first name. Anyway, so this is what Park considers his first movie, even though he made two movies before this. He didn't have creative control of the first two movies that he directed, and he didn't like either one of those films very much because, like I said, he didn't have creative control. So other people were pulling the strings, and he was just following what they wanted, right? So he kind of disowned those first two movies, and he considers this his debut movie. All right, and this is not a bad movie, but I don't know if it's me, being white and watching a Korean film with subtitles, it was a bit confusing to figure out. Maybe if I was like I lived in South Korea or something for a while and I understood the culture and you know the ins and outs of the let's say of the Korean War that split Korea into two. You know, the North Korean being communist and South Korean being capitalist, right? More of that history. Anyways, but there's a demilitarized zone, a DMZ, that goes across the north part of South Korea and the south part of North Korea. And within that demilitarized zone, there's a joint security area where both the North Korean army and the South Korean army are very close to each other. Anyway, so this is about a South Korean army guy who ends up getting captured when he was doing his business. You see him squatting over with toilet paper roll in his two fingers, or whatever, and then he ends up getting captured. But then he ends up shooting two North Korean soldiers in the JSA on the North Korean side, and then he escapes back to the South Korean side. Anyways, it's a big, huge international incident which end up starting a war, and so they bring in this third party who's a Korean girl, but she was actually born in Switzerland, so she speaks English and she speaks Korean, and she's in there for the UN to investigate this, and then she goes around investigating. It was quite interesting, but it was hard to follow because of the way that Park ended up. He does flashbacks and he moves things around. But whereas in let's say Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, where he does that, he plays with time and everything. In Pulp Fiction, you could still follow it, right? And so even though, let's say, like the most stark part of Pulp Fiction was when Bruce Willis goes back to his house to get his father's watch, and John Travolta is there taking a crap in the bathroom, and he had left his gun on the kitchen cupboard, and so he comes out of the bathroom just as Bruce Willis is in the kitchen getting got his watch, and he picks up the gun and blows John Travolta away. And then the next scene, it cuts from there. The next scene after that is John Travolta and Samuel L. Johnson talking to each other. So that's the most stark time play that Tarantino did in his film. But you could still follow. You knew that even though John Travolta's dead in one scene, the next scene he's alive again. You know that scene happened before, right? So. But in this film by Park, he kind of plays with time and he reveals a story, because what seems to be the story at the beginning doesn't end up being the story at the end. So there's like, as he reveals things, you get the story at the end. But it was confusing for me. I had to actually watch the film. I spent like three hours or so watching this film. I watched it and then I watched it again. All right. And still, even the second time, I was still a little bit confused on it, but maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just dumb, right? But it was an interesting film. Now, saying that, it isn't as good as, let's say, Old Boy or, his Vengeance trilogy. That's probably what really, really made him like one of the greatest film directors of all time, especially Old Boy, to come out of South Korea. So. But this one is not too bad at all. And Arrow put out a really nice edition for it with a nice slipcover. All right, so that's JSA. And then I watched this one, The Seventh Curse, and this is directed by Lam Nai Choi. All right, so this is, I think it's not South Korean. This is like Hong Kong cinema, right? Anyways, came out in 1986, and this is an extremely fun film if you don't mind like really bad special effects, because whoever did the special effects really did it cheesed up, right? I mean, there's this flying baby thing that comes and eats you or whatever, right? And anyways, there's like this monster dragon looking thing that flies around, but you can tell, even though you don't see the strings when he flies around, that he's attached to to a thing that holds him up or whatever. Anyways, it's really a lot of really cheesy scenes, but it's a really fun film. It's really enjoyable to watch. It reminds me of like for tone, it reminds me of Big Trouble in Little China. You know, that kind of idea, right? Got a bunch of magic and everything else, but it's not meant to be taken too seriously. But there's more horror elements in this film, The Seven Curses. Basically, it's about a doctor who's also kind of like an action hero, all right? And he kind of reminds you of like an Indiana Jones type of guy. Anyway, so he's in Thailand, in the forest or in the jungle of Thailand, looking for a cure for AIDS. And there's this tribe that's a really mean, nasty, bad tribe, and he ends up going, scouting around his campsite, and he comes in contact with a girl from this tribe, right? And so they're having a magical ritual that he ends up going with some friends of his from the camp to go watch, even though he was told by like the head archaeologist or whatever, head doctor or whatever of the camp not to go there because they're not very nice people, let's put it that way. And he decides, well, that girl that he met, she's going to be sacrificed to some blood god or whatever, and so he decides he's going to go save her, and then he goes saves her. But the witch doctor there puts a curse on him called the seven curses. Basically, what happens is different parts of his body and his legs and his chest explodes, and each day, and the seventh explosion inside of his body, like a blood explosion, is going to happen in his heart, and it's basically going to kill him, right? So he only has 7 days to live. But the girl that he saved, she uses her magic she cuts the top of her breast and pulls out this ball that's like her magic or whatever, right? And he swallows it, and it postpones that curse for a year. So a year passes, and he starts having these curses happen to him. So he travels back to Thailand to go get these eyes of this magical statue, and if he eats one of those eyes, it'll end up releasing him from the curse, right? And anyways, it goes from there. So it's basically a B type of movie, Hong Kong cinema action, lots of martial arts and everything, and a lot of cheesy special effects stuff. Anyways, it's quite fun if you haven't seen it. And 88 Films ended up putting it out. All right, and you get Chow Yun-fat in it as well. So him of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which made his name, I think, or was it? What was those John Woo films that he was in as well, right? So, all right, so that's that. And then I found this Mystic River, which I had on DVD, but I didn't have it on Blu-ray. And this is directed by Clint Eastwood. One of the films that he's directed that he doesn't star in. Most of the films that he directs, he also stars in, but this one he didn't. This one stars Sean Penn and Kevin Bacon and Tim. What's the other guy? The really tall guy from Shawshank Redemption. Tim Robbins. Yeah. So basically, it's about these three kids are playing hockey, and they live in Boston. They're playing hockey on the street, and the city has poured some cement for the sidewalk, and they start writing their names in the cement, and then this guy who's pretending to be a police officer stops them and gives them shit, and then takes the Tim Robbins character away in his car and basically puts him in a basement, and him and a Catholic priest abuse him for like a week or 2 weeks or whatever before he escapes, right? And then it jumps forward like 30 or 40 years or whatever, and then Kevin Bacon is a police officer for the Boston police or whatever, like a state trooper, state investigator and Tim Robbins is a dad. I don't know what his job was because they never really told us what his job was. Maybe he was unemployed. And Sean Penn is a corner store owner. He owns a corner store in the neighborhood, right? Anyway, so there's Sean Penn's daughter, like 17 or 19-year-old daughter, ends up getting taken and murdered, and then it goes from there. And it gets really interesting in the psychology department of this thing, and suspicion, and whether you should be a vigilante or not, or whether you should take the law into your own hands, and that kind of thing, right? And because Sean Penn is kind of out of the criminal world of Boston, but he's kind of like on the fence about it. He still has friends who are in like the criminal area of Boston, but he's kind of gone straight because he has a family, whatever. Right? So, but anyway, so it gets really interesting, and it's extremely good. It's one of the great like modern films that Clint Eastwood directed, along with like $1 Million Baby. That's another really good one that he directed, but he actually starred in it. So, he's up and down. Most of the films that he's directed are good, all right, but he does have some of them that he's either starred in or he has directed that have been, mediocre. But most of the films are really good that he's in. So, all right, so Mystic River, if you have not seen that, it's extremely good. And then Amazon is having this like pre-Black Friday sale, and I found this for like $12, 10 or $12, I can't remember. Anyways, I ordered it because, as you know, when you collect anything, whether it's books or movies or whatever, your shelf space is limited to the amount of space you have, and eventually you'll end up filling up your space and you won't have any more room. So real estate on your shelves becomes an issue or a problem, right? So I had all three of these films on Blu-ray. No, actually I had two on Blu-ray and one on DVD of this trilogy. The Robert Langdon Trilogy. That started with the Da Vinci Code. This came out when the third film came out, which is Inferno. They combined all three of them in one DVD case, right? So this is like a third of the size of the three, the DVD and the Blu-rays that I had. So it takes up a third of the amount of space on the shelf. So Ron Howard directed all three of them. I know he did the first two. Did he do the third one? Yeah, he did all three of them. So I collect Ron Howard as a director. So I had all three of those films. So now I can take those off the shelf and sell them, and then put this on the shelf instead, and it's a lot less space, right? I just did that with a previous video. I did that with Hitchcock, with a bunch of Blu-rays from Hitchcock. I had a whole bunch of Blu-rays of Hitchcock movies and a DVD, nice velvet DVD box set that was all the rage back in the DVD days, right? And I got rid of all of that, and I had like 15 of his films that take up this much space on the shelf, which is just great, right? I did it also with all the James Bond films. There was this white cover Blu-ray edition that had all the Bond films up to the first two of the Daniel Craig films, if I remember correctly. So 22 or 24 of them, all in one nice compact package, right? So those are great. I love those, and I really love those for directors. Like if you can get like a box set of a director that takes up this much space and has like 15 or 20 of his films, right? Instead of having 15 or 20 of his films that take up that much space on your shelves, it's great. It makes you be able to fit everything that you're collecting, right? Anyways, so for the films, this is one of the few I would put the Godfather series and well, that's one of them that I can think of. Can I think of another one? Yeah, the Evil Dead trilogy. There's a few of them, but basically when you have a trilogy, two or three films, usually the first film was good and it was really good. So the producers said, hey, let's put out another film because the first one was really good, right? But it's usually the first film that's the best. Well, with Star Wars is another one. Star Wars, I think the third film is the best, even though most people don't. I really like the Ewoks, and I like the triumphantness and the the ending of it. I liked it better than the first one. The first one, it didn't have as good special effects, those scenes where the X-wing fighters are going down on top of the destroyers, the bad guys' destroyers. You can tell it's all white painted boxes and stuff, right? So, and that digital thing with the countdown when Luke Skywalker is going to shoot his missile into the Death Star. It has that countdown thing, that red, that looks kind of cheesy. But with the third film, it's quite fun and just like Charlotte's Web. If you watch this with a kid, you can teach them about death without it being like too overwhelming, right? So with Charlotte's Web, the spider dies, and anybody who reads Charlotte's Web who was a kid will always remember that Charlotte dies, right, and gets replaced by his children. It's just like the way that life goes, right? In this one of the Ewoks ends up dying, right? And his friend is shaking him to wake him up, but he doesn't wake up. So if you have like a 10 or 12-year-old that's watching the Star Wars, the third film can teach him about that as well. It makes you feel sad, but it's a movie. It's not real life. You understand what I mean? So you can teach it without it being too personal, right? Anyways, but I really like the third film because the forest scenes with them on those, motorcycle-like devices that they're driving around, that is really, really cool. I found that much more fun than a bunch of the other scenes in the other movies, right? I found that fun, and I found the Ewoks really cute, and I found it quite hilarious that they thought C-3PO was like a god and all that. Anyways, I quite enjoyed the third film more than the first, although most people didn't, right? Most people actually picked the second film as the best out of the three, right? So still, it applies. So with The Godfather, I found the second film better than the first film because it goes into the Corleone family, and you get Robert De Niro in it, and he's such a good actor as him back in Sicily or whatever. And that part, I found that history part really, really more interesting than the first film or the third. And this one also, I found actually the first film boring, but the second film was quite fun, and so was the third film. The third film involving the Catholic Church and the Vatican and everything else was that intrigue and everything. And anyways, it was quite fun because you got to see, like, let's say the Sistine Chapel. You got to see, and what I didn't realize that with this, because I've never been there, right? I didn't realize that the Sistine Chapel, the Da Vinci, the famous Da Vinci painting with Adam and God. I think it's Adam and God touching fingers. And that is only a very small section of the roof of the Sistine Chapel. I thought it covered the whole roof. The way that everybody talks about it, and the way they've shown it in pictures and everything, I thought it covered the whole roof, but it only covers a small section of the roof, right? Or the ceiling, I mean. And so that kind of, it's like, oh, okay, because it's just a small area of my God, the artwork. And I would really like to go to the Sistine Chapel at Vatican City in Italy and go look at all the stuff. But wasn't Jesus like a humble guy? You know what I mean? And all this extravagance is kind of, do you think religion has gone too far when you have your own country, your own city? Do you understand what I mean? And like the adulation and pomposity, is there a word? Pop. Anyways, it's ignorant intellectual. There's a word that starts with pop. It means like really elevated, really high in circumstance or whatever that surrounds the Pope, at least in this film, and how Ron Howard, shows how everything works in the film. If that is, and you see, the Pope goes, he attracts an audience. Let's put it that way, right? But isn't that kind of like, in a way, it's kind of like idol worship, isn't it? I don't know. It's like when you put so much veneration into a man, it kind of, doesn't it distract? I don't know. It seems, and the extravagance of Vatican City, which is its own country, right? Isn't that? Do you understand what I mean by the over extravagance of the whole thing. You know, the Catholic Church has done some really good things. You can't deny it. Um, but it really pats itself on the back a lot when it comes to richness, right? So, anyway, so that's just, as an outsider looking in, right? Anyways, but the third film deals with the Catholic Church, Inferno. It's basically about a guy who's going to release a virus that is going to eliminate half the population of the world. I may be confusing the two films. Hold on. Was that the second film? Anyways, the third film is, takes place in Italy, in Vatican City, and around, the Sistine Chapel and other areas, and see it's gorgeous, gorgeous place, right? And it really, really looks really nice on film. And yeah, anyways, it's a really good film. I think maybe the third film is probably my favorite, although I really like the second one as well. But anyway, so that's the trilogy. So now I can make more space on my shelves for other films. And that, one last one. I picked up this one today for $10. And it always so it's a World War Z, a Brad Pitt film. If you like zombie films, you'll come across this film. It isn't. I wouldn't put it up there with the elite zombie films like some of the Romero films or 28 Days Later. You ever seen that film? That is a really good zombie film, right? But if you like zombie films, you would like this film. It's basically, they don't exactly know. They think it's a virus, and it spreads. And Brad Pitt goes all over the world and realizes, I think when he was in Brazil, that the zombies will avoid people that already have a disease. Because he saw a bunch of zombies attacking a group of people, but they would go up to this boy and this old man who you could tell had some sort of disease or whatever, and they'd go up to them, kind of smell them or whatever, and then move on to other people. And so this virus or whatever knows sick people and avoids them because they can't really infect them, right? So anyways, he uses that as a vaccine, and by the end of the film, they start vaccinating people and getting out of the areas where the zombie outbreaks are the worst, so that the army can go in and do their thing, right? So it's a good film, but I don't think it's a great film. But Mark Forster directed it, and I collect Mark Forster as a director. I like him as a director. So I had this film already on DVD, but I didn't have it on Blu-ray, and I got it on a DVD Blu-ray Steelbook. You can't beat that. I really like Steelbook, but I don't like them enough to pay $40 for a Steelbook. If I can find the regular Blu-ray for $5, I'm going to pick up the Blu-ray. But if I can find it for 10 maybe, which I did, so that they look really nice on the shelf, especially when they're beside each other. It looks really nice, right? Now I don't do that with my films. I do them in order. If I collect the director, I'll have all Mark Forster's films together, right? But it's nice to have, for a reasonable price anyways, these ones. And I protect them in a plastic case so that they don't get scratched or wrecked, right? So if you like zombie films, I wouldn't push you away from this film, but I wouldn't think this film is one of the great zombie films, right? So that's World War Z in a nice Steelbook. So I can take the DVD and sell it or whatever. All right, so that is everything. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing. If you do so, we do a lot of these pickups, mixed hauls, where I go around to thrift stores or buy things. I rarely buy anything new. I did buy this one new, but it was like $12, so it's like $4 per Blu-ray. It's worth it, right? But I will usually not buy anything new. For example, this one I bought new. New as in the person who bought it first didn't open the package, and I got it from him new. I'll pay up to $20 for a boutique Blu-ray, but I won't pay more than that. And if it's, let's say, you consider Kino Lorber's boutiques, because they just put out regular Blu-rays, right? Um, they're not like super packaged with extra, a booklet and all the other things. Let's say like the Criterion does, or a lot of Arrow videos do, and things like that. So there are like Vinegar Syndrome or Shout Factory or whatever, they put out regular Blu-rays of more obscure films, more cult films, and things like that. And then people will pay an arm and a leg for them sometimes. But I only reserve that for like things that are worth it. That have like the extras to it, right? But even so, I rarely will pay. Maybe like a Criterion Blu-ray that has real nice extras, or an Arrow, like a nice Arrow. You might pay $25 for it, depending on how much it was new. But usually it's like 20, 15, 20, the most I'll pay for anything. So this was basically new, not out of its package. It's put out by Arrow Video, and so I got this for, I think it was 15 new. So this one was another one, 88 pounds. I got this one. This one was new as well, and I took the package out. And I got this for like 15, I think, as well. But here's the thing. Would you pay? I'll lastly say this, and then I'll end the video. Would you pay extra for a film that was never opened, if you intend to watch it? Especially if you intend to watch it, would you pay more for it? It seems like most people will. Now, I can understand a bit of that with a DVD, because used DVDs, they can get scratched pretty easily, but Blu-ray and 4K discs have a resilience to them that it's hard to scratch them, really, unlike a DVD or a CD that are very scratchable. All right, but I don't know what the technology that they use with Blu-rays or 4Ks, but like if you go around with and you're collecting used stuff, if you're collecting used stuff and you see a CD, you're going to check the CD, because a lot of them are scratched and you just don't want to buy them, right? And same with DVDs, but not with Blu-rays or 4Ks. I mean, I still check them, but like 99% of them that I check are unscratched, right? Which is not what a DVD or a CD is like usually, right? So let's say you have a film that somebody bought new and they never got around to watching it, and then they no longer want it anymore, so they sell it. Would you pay, like, instead of $15 for it used, would you pay $25 for it because it's still in its wrapper? I don't. All right, I'm not sure if you do, but people do, because when I sell things, I can sell something that's still in its package at a higher rate, and people will buy it. I just don't understand the mentality of it. If you're going to watch it, if you're going to put it on a shelf as a keepsake and you're not going to touch it, yes, maybe that would be a good reason, right? Because it'll stay in pristine condition. But if you buy it and then you take it home and you take the plastic wrap off it and you watch it, it is now used, right? So you may have bought it new, but the only time I'll buy something new is from, like the company that put it out, right? Like if I buy a Criterion new, maybe I'll buy it through Amazon or something like that. But then I'll buy it new, because once somebody else buys it and then resells it, even though it's still in its package, it's technically used, all right? Because it's not being sold by the original people that sold it. So it's a used item. It's already been bought new, and now somebody else owns it. It's now used, right? But it just never been opened, right? So do you pay a premium for that so that you can be the one that opened it? I can understand maybe for a DVD or a CD, if you're buying it online, because you can't really look at it. Especially if it's shipped to you, you have to take the person who's selling its word for whether it's nice or not. So like with baseball cards and things like that, people are slowly moving towards these slabbed ones. They're in a plastic case, and they're rated on whether they're mint or very good or whatever, right? They've been rated already by the slabbing company, and so people have more confidence in buying them because a person could say something is near mint, and when you get it, it looks more like it's very good, and you paid a premium for the near mint, right? So I can understand it maybe in the baseball card area, but in movies, um, they make them over and over and over again. It doesn't, so somebody loses a license, another person picks up the license and then puts it out themselves, right? And it's usually at a higher, it may have started off as a DVD, but then it was released again as a Blu-ray, and you'll want the Blu-ray over the DVD, all right? So it's not like the DVD is going to hold its value or the Blu-ray is going to hold its value when the 4K comes out. Do you understand what I mean? So I wouldn't pay a premium on the condition of something or still in its package like maybe I would with, let's say, a baseball card or a comic book or something, right? Because those are unique and they're not, redone all the time, right? I don't think anybody cares whether they have the original Criterion collection of the Seven Samurai. If they can get a 4K version of it from Criterion, they would replace their 4K version, which just came out, and get rid of the DVD that came out 30 years ago, right? But you wouldn't come out with a reprint of a comic book and then throw the original comic book out. You'd be a lunatic for doing that, right? Right? But that's how DVDs and CDs and that differ from, let's say, comic books or sports cards or whatever, right? So I don't know why anybody pays a premium for a new product, other than maybe they want to be the one that opens it. Maybe that's the reason, or maybe they want to have it as a keepsake and they're not going to open it. That may be a reason, but 99 times out of 100, if you pay a premium just to get something that's new rather than used, you're just giving your money away. Because if you bought it used, especially if it's a Blu-ray or 4K, it's not going to be scratched. You're going to be able to play it. All right, you know what I mean? It's the condition of a Blu-ray or a 4K, whether it's opened or whether it's not opened, is pretty much the same, like 99 times out of 100, right? So I'm not sure why you pay $5, $10, $15 more if it's new. Well, because it's not. It's still used. It just hasn't been opened, right? Whether you would buy it because it's still in its plastic wrap. All right. So anyways, that's my spiel or whatever. All right. So you have a great day, and I'll talk to you in my next video, and bye for now.